let's go ahead and get started. So this is the 30 plus things you definitely missed from Essentials. Or, like I said, or it wasn't just there. So let's go ahead and just page through here. Categories we're going to talk about. Navigation, customization. We're going to cover a few of those topics. Settings and templates. Parts, assemblies, and drawings. And some other stuff if time permits. Last year this was an hour and a half and we still ran out of time. So we're going to try to condense it smaller and get somewhere. Alright, let's start off with tools and options. Basically, this is one of the things that as a new user, there's a lot of data here. You really don't get a chance during the class to explore a lot of these items. There's a few things in here that just going through the list may make or break you on a few of these things. So let's see if we can get a bigger picture of that. So basically this first one is the system options. So everything on the left-hand side tab that says system options is specific to your computer only. So if you make changes on this tab, you don't have to worry about them populating somebody else's machine or some kind of errors. These are your own personal preferences. So as you go through these different lists, make sure you get the settings that you want. I'm going to pull my SolidWorks up from the background here just to show you. So he had it listed as tools options. You can also hit this little guy right here. And that gives us a little bit better picture of what we're looking at. So just going through, just the system options, we have all sorts of things under the general tab. And there's a few things on this first page that are pretty important. As you start working with some of the new tools, SolidWorks likes to develop even sometimes, maybe even during a service pack, they'll add an option in here to fix some sort of behavioral problem with the software or some enhancement that they've issued. And if we look through these, sometimes there's new stuff that pops in here. Like some of you guys might have been seeing stuff about the freeze bar, or you've seen Feature Expert in class, but you get back to the office, it doesn't work. And those functionalities are actually controlled in your options menu. That's why they may not work. And this is another reason to go back to. Let's say you're going to update your system from one version to the other. When you're looking at that, and you go, oh yeah, they got this nice tool called Copy Settings Wizard. I'm going to go ahead and use that, and I'm going to update to my new system. One of the problems with that is when you copied the settings from the old version, some of these settings didn't exist. So now you have the default setting out of the box for it, or maybe no input at all, which may just leave it as a default blank, which means it's not going to be on. Okay, so keep that in mind. Anytime you go from a major release to a major release, you should go through, set up one machine the way that it needs to be, and make that your copy settings wizard so you have a backup. Use that for deploying to other people or sharing with other coworkers or whatever. Try not to continuously drag the copy settings tool along version to version. There's just too much stuff that could go on in here, and there's too many things that can be easily overlooked by bringing in old settings. So best thing to do, pull up a new station, pull up an old station side by side, go through your checklist, make sure all your file locations are set, make your 2013 copy settings file from that. Okay. So like I said, there's a few things in here like the enable freeze bar. That's unchecked by default, but you may be learning stuff about that either from other coworkers or from classes that you've taken or even watching videos on YouTube or whatnot. So that's actually an option setting to turn that on. Same thing with Feature Expert. And looking through a couple of these other things. Confirmation corner. Being a new user, heck, even being an old user, confirmation corner is nice to have. So it lets you know you're in a sketch and that you can get out of it or cancel all your changes or accept changes right from there. So those things are set up here, and it's specifically only your machine. So as we can go down the list, there's all the things for drawings, all the different settings that you have there. A lot of people will vary on whether they show sketch points and not show them. I've seen it any other way. It really doesn't matter. Again, it's only for your machine, so it doesn't make too much difference. Display style. There's a few of these things that are, again, preference only. The one thing to really highlight under display style is, please, for God's sake, don't use draft quality, ever. it's one of those things that it's been in and out of the software a few times, and we really just, once it gets in there, it's hard to get rid of it, and people chase it around, and then they're like, hey, why are my drawings all fuzzy? And well, yeah. So make sure it's set to high quality and keep it there. And the real big problem with this is only for your station, your machine, but notice what this is. Display styles for new views. So when you create a drawing, you're creating it in draft quality for everybody that uses that document, right? So it might be your machine setting, but you're setting up the document to possibly have issues for somebody else. Okay. So as we go through this thing, there's a few other things here, display selection. Oftentimes we'll get people asking about the different selection capabilities. And enable selection through transparency is one that people will oftentimes either, man, I'm trying to select this thing and I just can't get it. There's something in the way, you know, and it keeps picking this face and I just want the edge. And if that's your problem, come in here and take a look. This allows you to select through any transparent surface, okay? If this is unchecked, you're going to get stopped at the face of the transparent part. You won't be able to grab beyond that. Okay, so that's another real common thing to come up. So let's see here. And again, there's new ones coming in all the time. Display speed pack graphics. There's stuff that pops into these lists. It's important to stay current with the new items. Under performance, you would think this would be the biggest checkbox in there, but it's not. There's a few things underneath here that affect performance. There's other things in other areas that may affect performance way more than this area. We have the load lightweight. That's in here. That can do a lot of things for you. A lot of guys will have this checked all the time. Or resolving subassemblies, whether they do or don't, can impact just opening things right out of the gate. Level of detail. If you notice your graphics are having trouble keeping up, you can drag this over here, or you can turn it completely off. So what this actually does, if you're rotating a part, if I can get back, I gotta close this here first. It'd be nice to be able to show you that on the fly. When you're rotating something, if you notice that it gets boxy when you rotate and you get a bunch of big cubes on it, I don't know if this has got even enough stuff to do it here. But let's see here, maybe I can make it. Yeah, I don't even have enough in this assembly to do anything with it. But if you see that it comes up with big blocks around everything and you rotate and it gets all square and chunky, that's because your level of detail is turned way down to help performance and rotation faster. So when you're doing that, if you notice that's going on and it really drives you crazy, you can turn it up higher detail, and if you lose performance, just shut it off entirely. Okay. All right. So then under assemblies, we have lots of different options there again. Large assembly mode. One thing, I guess, that kind of catches people off guard. If you're running in large assembly mode, one of the options in here could be not to save auto recover information. Okay. If that's checked on and you crash, you don't have any auto recover. Why? You told it not to, right there. Okay. All right. Let's see. So there's a few other options in there. One that I really want to talk about that has a huge performance impact on you guys. Well, actually, before I switch that, that's a document property. Let's take a look at this guy right here. Sometimes different packages that you add onto SolidWorks will add more options to this menu as well. If you guys are running premium, you have your routing enabled, your routing will show up in here. If your routing is disabled, notice there's nothing in the tree for it anymore. Completely pulls that whole section right out of the options settings. So be mindful that there may be things going on inside your settings with different add-ins. All right, let's get back to his Prezi here and see where we're at. Document properties. A lot of times these are your drafting standards. You can be anything from your dimension fonts to your detail circles to section views. All that kind of stuff remains in this area here. So when looking towards, well, my company uses center marks all the time. Well, come on in here, turn your center marks on. There's a few of these things that really we talk about in the classes, even through some of the other classes like drawings and whatever else, but they're not huge topics. And it's just kind of yeah, we set this thing in the book just to get this exercise done, and let's just go through it and click, 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 click. And by the time you get done with it, you're like, is that important? I didn't really pay attention to it. So, and then later on, somebody's like, oh yeah, well, you're supposed to turn that on. Yeah, I think I saw that someday. Of all of you people that are here, how many have actually taken the SolidWorks Essentials course, the actual whole huge course? So, majority of you have. What did you think about that? Was it a lot of information to take in and relatively short amount of time? For most new users, yeah, it's a big deal, right? It's almost exhausting by the time you get through day 4, and you're like, there's a day 5? Maybe. Most of the vendors, I believe, almost everybody's 5 days now, right? Yeah. It used to be 4. Before that, way back when I started in '98, there used to be just this little tutorial manual you got, and it took about 45 minutes to go through. Yeah, it's gone a long way since then. But anyhow, so you'll notice that as you look at the system, if you pick a standard, say ANSI or whatever, if you come back through, anytime you change even the slightest thing in here, let's just go change, let's go change a font. And let's say I make it 8 point, say OK. When I come back to the standard, you'll see it says ANSI modified. Well, you know, somebody will call in the support and, hey, you know, well, what standard are you using? ANSI modified. Okay. What'd you modify? I don't know. Let's start over from the beginning. So you can actually do a rename on this, and you can tell it to be whatever you want. And then you can just, and that way you know what it is, or maybe you put a date on there. So that way you can kind of do like a revision control on your settings. Well, you know, back on this day, this drawing was no good. Well, we changed our settings then. So yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All right. Some of these items get kind of deep. As you go in through some of these, you can see that, you know, we have all sorts of different options underneath those. And some of them have sub-options and boxes that take you elsewhere, like the tolerance. So these things there's quite a bit in here of different levels, depending how far in you go. But this one's important. So as we start our models and we start working with things, a lot of you guys probably aren't the first people in your company to be using SolidWorks. Some of you are. Some of you are in charge of setting up your templates. Some of you don't have any control over it. But it's important to come in here and check things out. This has got a huge performance impact on people. You may see that this is almost in the red right now, or it actually is in the red area. When you get up into this area on a model, SolidWorks will even try to tell you, hey, that is not a good idea. Sliding into this zone will cause the file size to increase, the graphics performance to be slower, and substantially increase memory usage. If I'm just working on a document and I say, oh, you know, I'm trying to get this edge and it just doesn't look right and it's kind of chunky. So I'm going to crank that thing up. Go for it. Crank it up. Get what you need to get done, finished, and then move it back. The reason why this is important, if we look at this as a template setting, if it's in the red, everything you create will be huge. That could be parts. This setting exists for assemblies, and the setting exists for drawings. So you have the possibility of tripling up all of your settings, okay? And it's scalable to the size of what you're working on. So if I'm working on a small part, my deviation will be small. If I'm working on a big part, the deviation will be big. Well, that brings us to another point then. What is deviation? What is this actually telling us? Well, if you watch the little circle down here, and we get that down here, it starts to kind of show you a picture of what this is really doing. This is setting up the deviation between the true arc and the straight lines, okay? So in all the CAD packages, and everybody's got some kind of straight line variation. That's how graphics cards work, okay? We're looking at this. If I have a large deviation, I have less segments, okay? So the straight line deviates from the arc at the spacing noted in the box, okay? So if that number becomes really small, it means you're using a really small segment and it's getting closer and closer to the real arc in space, okay? If that is very small, when you're working on a 3D model, those small segments become one edge of a triangle to make a 3D face. So the smaller and smaller increments, the more and more triangles you have to deal with, right? Which is where your graphics intensity starts coming, the memory starts building up, and you start packing all this stuff away in your models. So if you imagine, when you talk about looking at a video card performance, they're measured in millions of triangles per second. Well, if you want to put millions and millions of triangles out there to try to calculate, go for it. But you probably aren't going to be very happy with your model performance after that. So make a check. It'd be a mental check for you all, just to go back and make sure it's not floating up there. Usually, we like to see them somewhere in this range. It still looks circular, but it's, you know, pretty good. And if we go ahead and set that up, let's just go ahead and set that guy. When you get in on something like this, you can kind of see this going on. So you can see those ridges there. Because I've got it set lower now than it was before, I can see those more clearly. When I come out here to select that line, I'm not getting anything, right? But when I come out here, then it starts to highlight. Why is that? Well, because now I'm over the actual arc, okay? What I'm seeing is not where the arc edge lies. But if I want to make that selection easier, if I come up to the point, that vertex is actually sitting along the arc. So if I want to grab that edge, and if I'm really zoomed in there, it's not grabbing where I want to get it, and I'm getting a face now, I want the edge, and there's the edge. Why is it way out here? Okay, well, your performance is set to do that. But if I'm zooming in somewhere like this, I know where that edge is. It's right there, right there, right there, right there. Okay? All right, so everybody's going to go back to their office and check that first, right? I bet you are. All right, well, let's go ahead and step through this. So we talked about the drafting standards, and we talked about image quality. And there's our box that we were talking about. How do we tell we're in a sketch? For existing users that have been on it for a while, heck, even some of us still are like, why doesn't this command work? Oh, I'll push it again. That'll make it better. How about now? Nope. Oh, I'm still in the sketch. Okay. Easy ways to find out. Confirmation corner, we talked a little bit about that. There's an option to turn this on and off in the settings, right? We also have the rollback bar, which will tell you there's a sketch going, and in the bottom of SolidWorks will say editing sketch. So we're looking at here, confirmation corner, here's the rollback bar, and editing sketch right down there. How many of you are still on 2011? Okay. You want a nice reason to upgrade to 12 or better? How about that. 2012 and beyond, we have the capability to pull up our units right from the toolbar, the taskbar. So we can get in there, change inches, metric, back and forth. It's always nice to have. You start going and you're like, oh man, I didn't check my decimal places or whatever. You can do all that right through here. You can say edit document units, right back to the options menu, brings you right through there. So you don't have to dig around in the toolbar options to find that either. Mouse gestures are contextual. They have a little page on that, right? In the essentials these days, mouse gestures. All right. Was that a 12 thing too or 11? Remember? Was it 12? Okay. So another thing, if you're into this kind of stuff, to move forward into 12, we have this little ring here. This is a mouse gesture that is created. This pops up, I should say, when you drag with the right mouse button down. Okay? So if I'm in a model and I right-click and drag, that ring will pop up, and it allows me to pick different zoom angles or whatnot. And sometimes if you're really going fast and you think you're clicking on something else, or you want to right-click and get somewhere, and you accidentally right-click and drag, and also, what happened to my model? Well, those things can be fun once you're used to it, but if you're still kind of clumsy with the software, you might be irritated that it's always jumping around on you, okay? So this might be my 2014 lesson. How do we turn that off? I might have a whole session on how do we turn that off? So here's the gestures. How do we turn that off? Well, it's under the customize, okay? And we can just turn them off, or we can use them. We can minimize them down to 4. We can make it 8. I think that's all the options they have for it right now. But right now when I'm going in here, those are zooms. If I'm in a sketch, it becomes sketch items. If I'm in a drawing, they're drawing items, assemblies, and so forth. Okay, so that thing constantly moves. So that's what he means by they're contextual. But here's a few other things showing how those things change around. Okay, and in drawings, we have annotations and dimensions. All right, so here's how we mess with them. Let me get out my sketch. If you right-click on the big ribbon, or any other toolbar if you don't have the ribbon up anymore, you can pick other types of toolbars to throw out there, and you can go all the way down to this bottom list here. Customize menu is this menu. Customize here is all of your toolbars. So under the Customize menu, we have mouse gestures. Enable or disable. So how do you turn it off? Right here. How do you limit it to 4? Right there. You can also assign gestures to different commands. So if you wanted to, instead of have the default ones, you can pull those off of there, and you can put any of the things in this list onto that. Some of the things don't make the cut, but most of the commands you're probably looking for will be on here somewhere. So it can show you all this different stuff. Okay? It also tells you when it's going to be active. During a drawing and during sketches is when you'll see Smart Dimension available. Okay, so you can set that up for each mode, parts, assemblies, drawings, whatever. Okay? That's a good place to be. If you're not into that, you can turn it off right there. Okay. While we're in here, what else is good? Toolbars. Going through and setting up any command you want to any toolbar, not a big deal. Just go to the command section that you want. Find the commands that you're looking for. And actually a good one here, let's do sketch, right? One that you'll use a lot after you go through Essentials class is the Modify Sketch button. But it's not a default setting in SolidWorks toolbars. Okay, so you'll want to go down to Sketch, and then on the list over here you'll see commands that you can use. And if we're looking here, is the Modify Sketch button. So I want that on my Sketch toolbar. I'm just going to drag that out and drop it on my toolbar, and now it's there forever, or until I reset my machine or whatnot. Or I use somebody else's copy settings wizard that doesn't have it on, and then I'm going to get stuck in it again. Yeah? What's that? Well, yeah, you can take it off. But I'm saying it's there now every session, unless you reset your machine or get somebody else's copy settings file. I mean, it's not a big deal to take it off of there. You can do the same thing. Drag it off, drop it in space, it's gone. Okay? Let's see here. So we have those guys. Some of the other things that really don't get talked about too much, you can set up larger icons, turn tooltips off, use large tooltips, and these guys are kind of interesting too. Some people find it easier to see the words versus the tooltip when they're starting to learn the stuff. Okay? So while we're looking through here, I'm going to turn off the Show and Shortcut menu. Okay? What that does, instead of giving me the toolbars that pop up on top, it gives me a list of options that I can use. These are, the choices I have for this. And it gives it to me by words, and it shows me the symbols next to it on the side. Okay? That would be versus, and this is too big here. That would be versus seeing just these guys show up. Okay? So some of these options, now that they're on this toolbar, don't appear down here. Okay? So to get these guys down here, go to your standard, or your settings, customize, and you can turn this off to get those to be just words. Okay? Okay, so your 3 new best friends. I'm not really sure where Todd was going with this, but I got a pretty good idea. A lot of times when you start with your sketches, the use of construction geometry becomes useful. A lot of people try to get things defined in space, and sometimes they don't have anything good to reference off of, so they just click it and say fixed. Well, fixed is great and all, but fixed should only be temporary, because you really want to have everything some sort of dimensional control so you can move it around and shift it. If you're fixing a lot of things, you're going to have problems getting stuff to move properly. So the construction geometry, using construction lines and whatnot, is good to help you define some things that maybe you don't obviously see to start with. Convert entities, we'll talk a little bit about that, and open sketches for cuts. So let's go ahead and take a look at just one of these parts here. Under Sketch, you have the ability to start with a line or a center line. And sometimes you'll start with one and then realize you need the other one. Okay? So if I'm out here and I'm just drawing away and all of a sudden I go, I wanted that to be regular. So you can select all those. You can get the construction geometry switch box right here, or you can save for construction checkbox over here. So there's places, multiple places to do all that. Just take that off, toggles you back in. Now, using this guy, if we just said, okay, that's great, I want to make a cut out of that. Now typically, when we're in class, we're going to try to teach you to use closed boxes, shapes, and stuff like that to do your cuts with, and extrusions and whatnot, because, well, let's just be thorough, let's get it done right. But you can use this. It doesn't look like it's really doing much, but it's telling me it's going both directions. And it's showing me that it's going to cut to the inside of that. Or I can flip it the other way and cut to the outside. But if we do the inside, we say, okay, It assumes we mean, like, kind of like a cut with surface. Anybody use that one yet? Cut with surface? That's a pretty good one too. This is kind of like that. It's giving us the ability to use an open sketch. It's kind of the reverse of doing an open sketch extrusion. Like if you're working on sheet metal, you can do just an L shape and make an extrusion, material thickness one side or the other. Same concept, it's just an open sketch. So it doesn't all have to be closed. If you want to make sure you've got everything in the order of where you want it to be, like I want it all cut to the inside or the outside, you can do that. So let's use this as our convert entities example. If I want, I can pre-select and hit the convert entities, and that brings that into an actual sketch line. Okay, it's not just the edge anymore. There's actually an entity there. Or you can turn the command on first. You can even use select chain if you want, and then pick multiple entities, and then confirm it. Okay, then you're looking at having those lines picked up with it. And we just hit our trim command, come out here, trim that off, and now when we leave, we mess up our feature because it's looking for an open sketch that's not there anymore. Restriction. It doesn't even need a 2 anymore. Yes, yeah, that's the problem with that. There's a few things in SolidWorks. One would be like a revolve. When something is created as a thin feature, the sketch itself can be modified and it doesn't transform it back to a solid. You can basically get, like in a revolve, have you ever seen that message that comes up and says, and I think I should get that for you here. Let's convert this back to construction geometry for a second. There we go. All right, so this is a message. I don't know who wrote this one, but it never makes sense to people right out of the gate. When we come up to this, a sketch is currently open because we have a construction line, right? A non-thin revolution feature requires a closed sketch. Would you like the sketch to be automatically closed? I don't know. What's a non-thin revolution? So it means if you don't want this to be a thin feature like sheet metal revolve or plastic shell revolve, you need to close the sketch and then it will make it an entire solid. Okay? But the message you get isn't exactly clear about what that is. So you have to read it again. Non-thin, would you like it closed? Yes, okay. Non-thin solid, okay, good. There it is. All right? Now once you do that, you still have the choice of thin feature. Oh, no, I didn't want a solid. I wanted it thin. So we'll pick thin feature. And then it'll let me do that as a thin feature. All right? So the option's there right now. But once I confirm that, I say OK, go back to my revolve, there's not a thin feature checkbox. Okay? So the feature's been created. Now it's a solid. Thin feature is not available. Delete the feature. Recreate it. Kind of a pain, but once you understand that that's what's happening to it, not a big deal. Okay. All right. Todd's words of wisdom he left us with. Try and stay as close to out of the box as you can until you feel a little bit more comfortable with the environment. Sometimes you make changes for a temporary thing, don't realize it's still on there, and the next time you open up SolidWorks, you can't figure out why this thing doesn't work anymore. What's wrong with this thing? It doesn't work like I remember learning it. Well, the short-term memory on that might be a little bit skewed versus your long-term memory on why you did it in the first place. Okay. So, for the most part, start with the defaults and go from there. Not all of you are going to have that option. A lot of times when system administrators or CAD managers go through and they set a bunch of options that are what you guys want for the company, you've already got half of this taken away from you. All right. Okay, so here he's got an example of a cut feature. And he's got a right mouse menu up for right clicking. Why right click? Well, most of the options that you want are there, and you minimize mouse traffic. Okay, so if you're using the right click menus, a lot of functionality is built right into that. Let's go back to that for just a second here, see if we can get a better view of what he actually was doing. So he's got a cut feature here. Notice the right click mouse button gives us direction 1 options and direction 2 options. So he can do through all, he can give it up to next, he can specify blind. That stuff can be done right off the right mouse button. You don't have to travel back and forth to the command manager or the property manager on the side all the time to be selecting these options, okay? You can get those right off the mouse button. And you can also say okay or cancel it right from this area too. Okay, so those are good things to have. Going back into the options menu one more time. This probably should have been a little bit earlier slide, but there's a checkbox at the bottom here that says, help make SolidWorks products better by automatically sending your log files to Dassault Systems Corporation. Help SolidWorks make SolidWorks better. You know, back in the day, we might have looked at this box as, nobody's looking at that stuff. You might still think that. But SolidWorks has actually been paying a lot of attention to this button and a lot of the data that they've gotten. And for those of you that have had some systems issues and stability problems, SolidWorks is actually tracking all of that stuff. Your CAD managers can look back and say, well, I know this guy's been having a lot of trouble. If you open a support ticket with your support representative, they can look into this with SolidWorks. We can actually see a graph of your performance, your crashes, how many were system created, how many sessions you've killed on your own, and they can actually log all that now. But it only works if this box is on. Okay. Another place you can set this is during install. On the installation manager, at the end, you're finally like, yes, it's done installing, I can go run out of here. Nope, not yet. One button it won't let you get away with, and it's this one. It says, do you want to join Customer Experience Program? Yes. Okay. I don't care if you want to go through the help files or whatever. You can uncheck those on install, but make sure this one gets checked. Okay, Control B, Control Q, and Control R for parts, drawings, and assemblies. They all sound like the same thing, but they're really not. So the Control B is your rebuild, the stop and go light. Okay? Now rebuild will go back through and rebuild the features, the new features. And R refreshes the drawing screen, so it's a redraw, okay? Control R redraws the screen. It doesn't do anything to the features. It does not rebuild any of them. It just refreshes the graphics, okay? Control Q is the magic button. Control Q, there is no button in SolidWorks for. You don't see it on your toolbars next to your save menu. You don't see it next to the stop and go light, but it should be there. Control Q is what they call force regen. Force regen will rebuild every item in the feature tree. When you're using it in an assembly, it will rebuild every item in the assembly tree and the new updates from the part models. Okay, so it doesn't rebuild every feature and every model, just the new stuff from the sub-files and the main assembly. And it's explained here. Control Q in an assembly will rebuild assembly level features and mates. If there are rebuild flags on any items, these will also be rebuilt. Okay? Not the entire everything, so you can use it at the assembly level and it won't take you a day or 3 days. It'll just do that one. In parts, everything except for if you have the freeze bar enabled. If the freeze bar is enabled and actually pulled down to a certain spot in your feature tree, Control Q will not rebuild it. And drawings rebuilds any views and sketches. No substitute for Control S. That's save. Save, 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 and save often. And even when you think you've saved enough, save again. Something that a lot of times we get really in-depthly involved with our designs and we're working on something for a long time and we don't even realize 10, 20, 30 minutes has gone by, half a day, oh no, power went out. Now what? Wow, I've got the auto recovers, right? Oh, I was using large assembly mode. It's turned off. Oh boy. Somebody's going to have a bad day. Right? Control S, it's easy. It's right there. You can hit it while you're talking on the phone or whatever. Just go. Okay? Speaking of Control S, there's another S button function that we need to do. And while we're here talking about the S key anyways, let's put it out there. In SolidWorks, we have all of our toolbars. We did look at some customization for that and everything. The one thing you can't customize is this little area up here. But there's a toolbar that we can customize that's similar to this one. If you hit the S key on the keyboard, the S key will bring up this little guy. And the S key will allow you to pick up different features. If you're in a part model, it'll give you, it's contextual too, like the mouse gestures. It'll give you sketch items. It'll give you assembly items. It'll give you drawing items, depending what you're working in. Sometimes what you're looking for just isn't on there. So let's go into a sketch, and let's see how it works in there. S key. All right, good. Now I can get to my dimensions. I don't have to go anywhere. This menu pops up wherever my mouse is, right? There it is again. There it is. There it is, right? I can get out of my sketch. I can add dimensions. I can put fillets in, offsets, convert entity, whatever. The nice thing about this is, if I right-click that menu, I can customize this one. This makes it the most powerful toolbar that there is in SolidWorks. You can put any command you want on there. It doesn't even matter if it's not related to what you're doing. Okay, so you could put rebuild on there. You could put save on there. It doesn't care, right? This toolbar is all yours. And it's flexible. Just don't make it run off the page. We've had some people have things that they can't reach anymore because they're way too far off. All right? So, Control S is good. S button by itself, good too. Might be a new place for your hand to sit, in case some of you guys, and it also does searches too, in case some of you guys have a nasty escape key habit from some other program that I won't mention. There's a fix for that too. Usually in class it's take this hand and sit on it. You'll get rid of that eventually. All right. Oh, my favorite one. Toolbox. How many of you use SolidWorks Toolbox? How many of you actually have to set up SolidWorks Toolbox? A few of you, huh? How'd you guys get so lucky? It's really not all that bad. There's multiple places to get the Toolbox editor from. Inside of SolidWorks, you can pull that right off the Toolbox menu here. You can hit Configure here. You can also get it, Whole Wizard Toolbox, Configure. And you can get it from your Start menu. There's under the SolidWorks folder, there's a launch for it there too. So the Toolbox Configure allows you to set up part numbers, descriptions, materials, multiple configurations, whether you're using parts, and so on. And it's a little slow, but it's coming. There it is. Okay. It really houses a lot of data. That's why it's slow, okay? Let's not get that confused to start with. The whole wizard portion of this controls all of your whole wizard settings, okay? And these are all your counterbores, countersinks. You can go into these things, turn on and off any types that you want. You can narrow this toolbox down to just what your company is allowed to use or whatever you think that they're going to use most. You can also now install SolidWorks, eliminating other series of fasteners that you don't use, okay, and also ones that you maybe don't want available to people. Okay, during installation you can turn those off. If they're still on anyways, you can come in here and check those on and off as a group, okay. SolidWorks then still allows us to customize hardware through here, even though these bolts and screws from 2012 and beyond are no longer in this SW browser or MDB file. Okay, that MDB file is an access database that contains all the data for your whole wizard stuff, and it used to contain all the data for your screws, nuts, washers, everything. Okay. But they stripped that all out. They've pushed it into the parts now, and the only thing that resides in the database file is the whole wizard information. It does two things. One, it speeds up inserting fasteners. When you bring them into SolidWorks nowadays, they come in a lot faster because it doesn't open the database, and search the part file index, and then place the fastener. So now it just drops the fastener in there much faster, okay? The other thing that it does is it's changed the folder structure. When they went ahead and moved all these files over, the original paths aren't in the same spot anymore. Now that sounds scary for some of you guys that have already had reference issues with other things. It's not a bad deal. When SolidWorks did the integration and they updated, they told the toolbox parts where to be found again. Okay, so it's not going to hurt any of your data. You can still upgrade. It's not a big deal. Well, let's take a look at one of these. So if we go underneath here and say, let's say we're going to work with a binding head screw. You'll see all the data come up here. All the sizes, lengths, all that's here. You can enter your part number fields, and you can actually enter in additional custom properties if you want something to be on there. I can hit that, and I can give it a value, and it adds a new column for our data off of that. So all you need to do for that, say add new custom property. You can make it your SolidWorks World custom property. So everybody's going to go home and put one of those in, right? And then you can give it a default value. You can make a list value out of it or whatever you want. It only does the specific one. Well, or wait, no, the property will be there for all of them. The settings you set are specific to the fastener. So if all right, so let's say this drawing title one isn't just here, it's here too. But I have to specify whether I want to use it for this fastener or not. So there may be like materials that don't apply to all your fasteners, but they do in some cases, so you can turn on and off the property. But yeah, you got to go through the whole list. Okay. Another thing that might save you here though is this little button right here. This guy here does import-export. What that does is it pushes all this information out to an Excel spreadsheet. You can do all your configuration there. You can add all your part numbers, part descriptions, custom notes. You can remove lines of different fasteners, sizes, and that type of thing. You can do that all in the spreadsheet. It's much faster than doing it in here. Re-import the data. It sets the toolbox up based off of the Excel spreadsheet. So that's one thing to keep in mind too. If you're doing these setups and it's like, oh man, there's a lot here. There is a lot there, okay? You can use the data export to help you get that done faster. All right, let's go ahead and close this out. Yeah. Oh, on the bottom, it's a screen resolution. It's all it is to it. I'm set real big right now because of the projectors, but you have to change it there, and that's really the only way to get around it. Otherwise, you're talking mainly just for the tools options. When you're finished with stuff in there, go back to the general tab and just hit enter. It'll accept OK as default, and it'll save your changes then. So like when I'm in here navigating, I can't get to those guys down there. Even if I try to pull it up, I still can't get to OK. General, main page, enter, it save changes. Okay. It's a lot easier than messing around with the resolution every other time. So. All right, let's see what else we got here. SolidWorks RX. This is an important diagnostic tool. It's under your start menu. Start menu, SolidWorks, whatever version you're in, SolidWorks Tools, RX. This records your system data. If you happen to be able to reproduce a crash, you can record a video of that. You can document the crash. We get all your system information. It'll zip the files up for you, and then you can send them in to your reseller. Okay? So RX tool is good. Other things that the RX will do for you, the RX will also do a quick little check for you on your graphics card. So let's say we go in here, Tools, SolidWorks RX. In the background, it's cooking my MS info, my Microsoft info, diagnostic tool. Look at that. So you can see system errors right away. So this thing is telling me I've got an NVIDIA card, it's a supported card, but my driver, no good. And without internet connection, it's really having a hard time, right? What this does is it actually goes back to the SolidWorks website, and it looks up your machine, graphics card you have installed, version, operating system, and it should tell you in here what driver you should be running, and if yours is supported, up to date, or not. Okay? So watch for that. And it goes through a couple other things here. The problem capture tool is over here. You can hit record video, and then it'll give you a video session running, and you can record whatever problems you're having. Maybe it's not a crash. Maybe you just want to have somebody look at some operation you're doing. Here's my workflow, and I don't get why I don't get the options I'm looking for. You can even send that in to your guys. When they get a chance to look at it, they can watch your video, and they go, oh, yeah, and they just type a quick email or chat back to you. You know, this is what's going on with that. Okay? Design library, we kind of run out of time here, but the design library is off on the side here. Any features you create, you can drag in, or you can even hit, if you highlight it in the tree and hit add feature to the library, it'll make a design library feature based off the one in your feature tree right now. So let's say you've got a specific cutout or a hole wizard hole or something you've manually done, some sort of multi-step hole. You can create that as a feature, and then you can add it to your design library. It allows you to pull it out of there and drop it onto a different part, and it'll create the feature for you on the new part. So this is something that we don't talk about much, but it really needs to be there. If you don't get quite all of what that does, check it out in the help menu. The help menu also is nice if you go underneath. By default, it's set to use web, right? Yeah, if you uncheck the use SolidWorks web help, what you get is the old help menu some of you are familiar with, which does the searches and favorites and things like that that you might be used to looking for. This is more of an index-based thing. So if we look up the rebuild topic and we say, okay, rebuild, here's what that does. So let's say we look up and you'll get topics to look at for that. And you can go through each of these things. It'll give you different examples for all those things, okay? All right. What else do we got covered here? Yeah, time left. Nope. Last thing here. Any of you that are working with the Solid Network License Manager, there's a few things to note. every time you go from one version to another, your license manager needs to be updated. You can do this first. Okay? It will work on older versions of SolidWorks. But update the license manager first. That'll allow your new systems to find license when they open up and they start digging around. One thing to remember is after you do your upgrade, make sure to click Modify, and you can either do a transfer if you're turning off your server, or you can do Activate, Reactivate if you're using a machine over again. So what that does then is it allows SolidWorks to go out, grab a new version of your license data, and pull it down for you so it gets everything up to date for the next release. Okay? And then after that, all of your seats should be running. These are typical calls we get all the time. Okay? Things that didn't make the cut. There's a ton of them. So we have this posted. It still has Todd's information. I told him that was going to be his punishment for making me do his presentation. All of you guys get to go ahead and ask him the questions. So, thanks for coming, guys. Have a good day, and enjoy the rest of the conference.